I covered a story a little while ago about a guy named Dr. Ewan Lenahan, and he did some research where he correlated some Twitter accounts and found several journalists that were deeply connected with Antifa. And I pointed out that it was, take it with a grain of salt. Just because they're connected on social media doesn't really mean anything. They could be arguing with each other. They could just follow them. They could be a journalist who covers the stuff, which they do. And I think anybody who presents you with this weird crime web and tries to do a guilt by association thing should be, for the most part, ignored, right? But I did talk about it because some of the people that were implicated I knew personally were working with Antifa, so it is what it is. We see this story from Columbia Journalism Review. I did highlight the story on my main channel, but I want to get in depth because new information has emerged. The story is from Jared Holt of Right Wing Watch, who's writing for the Columbia Journalism Review. And I want to be a dick or anything, but this is just not news. Apparently, information has leaked showing that Jared Holt has purposefully lied, I guess, made fake news. The story's titled, Right-Wing Publications Launder an Anti-Journalist Smear Campaign. And we'll read some of this. Last month, a number of media outlets ran stories touting claims from a study posted on Twitter that alleged nefarious connections between anti-fascist activists and national level reporters who cover the far right. On May 15, Ewan Lenahan, a far-right social media user, I don't know what that means, far-right, presented what he said were excerpts from a data set that proved prominent reporters who cover extremist movements were closely associated with anti-fascist activists. Whether or not his research is legitimate, I don't know. I take all of that with a grain of salt, and correlation is not causation, and simply because they interact on Twitter doesn't mean they support each other. I interact a lot with Antifa accounts as well. You wouldn't call me pro-Antifa. However, several of the journalists implicated I know personally have seen their private communications and can say, yeah, these guys are literally working with activists on fake news. But let's read on. He identified himself as an online extremism researcher despite having no association with any previously known organization that researches extremism. That's actually not true. We have a story here from the Daily Caller. It says, behind the CJR's hit job on a researcher exposing Antifa journalist connections. Apparently, Dr. Ewan Lenahan published a massive response on the 6th of June to Jared Holt, answering all of his questions in depth. And we actually have, there is a publication which has accepted his research paper, of which he is associated. The paper was submitted in May. So for some reason, we have fake news up on CJR. Let's read more because it does get really interesting. They say, in reality, Lenahan was already an established right-wing troll, now blanket banned for violating rules against managing multiple Twitter accounts for abusive purposes. However, this is apparently also omitting really important context. In reality, the account run by Ewan Lenahan, Progressive Dad, received a suspension for mocking the alt-right, apparently. So I don't know if you can call it far-right. I don't really know anything about the account, just that at least in some capacity, it wasn't just targeting the left. But according to Ewan Lenahan, I guess, he said it was mocking outrage culture from the left and the right. Jared Holt writes, Lenahan's Twitter thread was met with enthusiasm on the right. His claims among them that one writer is an eco-extremist, that a website that posts court documents is a doxing site, and that Antifa is often more violent than right-wing fascist groups, were taken at face value by outlets including Breitbart, PJ Media, Red State, and Human Events, and RT. Except some of these were commenting on them, and Breitbart, I'm not a fan of. Some of their stories are okay, but they definitely swing things, and so does. I gotta say this: outside of Human Events, I think Human Events is pretty good. They've screwed up. I've criticized them before. The other ones, I tread very carefully whenever I use any sources from them. It's not that it's fake, but it's just so bloated with hyper-partisan nonsense. It is the latest example of unreliable information circulating rapidly through an ecosystem of fringe outlets without even the appearance of due diligence, such as baseless reports that tech platforms discriminate against conservatives, or that leftist agitators are trying to foment a new American Civil War. Well, the second one I think is absurd. I think no one's trying to make it happen. It's just people are getting divided. But I think it's and what is this a link to? PS Mag. Discriminate against conservatives. This is just ridiculous, like fake news. Pinterest admittedly, was censoring conservative groups. Jack Dorsey said they were too aggressive. They're on the record. We're past this now. But I guess, Jared Holt doesn't really care. I don't know. Now, here's what gets funny. So, when I saw this crime web thing, I'm like, here we go. They did the same thing to me. I take it all with a grain of salt. Some of the people on there are self-admitted Antifa. I don't think it's an issue. And, he says that they're connected You could be connected to Antifa because you rag on them all the time. I'm sure if Sargon was still online, he'd be very connected to them, so it's kind of silly. However, Jared brings up Quillette, a publication dedicated to free thought that gave Lenehan a bylined article on its site to share his claims, where Lenehan embedded posts from his Twitter thread, echoed his assertion that reporters were working to promote Antifa activists. Some of them are, yes, I can confirm that because I have leaked documents. I shouldn't say leaked documents, I've seen their private communications, is a better way to put it. And accused them of, their messenger stuff, I've seen it. And accused them of violating professional ethical standards. I mean, that's kind of paradoxical. Like, literally, CJR is violating ethical standards because Ewan Lenehan sent this huge email thread to Jared Holt, of which he included none of the relevant context, such as the fact that he was banned for mocking a right-wing group or something like that. When CJR reached Quillette founding editor Claire Lehman for comment via Twitter, she first inquired what issues CJR found with Lenehan's study. When CJR responded asking how Quillette determined Lenehan's allegations were legitimate, and whether Lenehan's story underwent a fact check or legal review prior to publication, she declined to comment. And? So she doesn't have to comment. You want to know what's funny? What really makes me angry about this story? Check this out. September 19th, 2018, YouTube's Secret Life as an Engine for Right-Wing Radicalization. They published the infamous AIN report, the Alternative Influence Network, which has no data, which makes false connections, false statements of fact. And when I reached out to CJR for comment, they ignored me. Did I make a hit piece saying CJR circulating? No. I made a video debunking it and criticizing several outlets. I didn't reach out to a major publication saying, I need to publish in your outlet. I reached out to several journalists and said, hey, can you tell me how you fact check this? Same as Jared. The only issue is Ewan Lenehan provided all of this information to Jared, apparently. And there's even, according to the Daily Caller, they say, Holt also insinuated that Lenehan was hiding something because he did not specify which journal was considering publishing his study. But Lenehan says he was never asked. The screenshot below confirms the article is under review by the journal Social Networks. I don't know what Social Networks is, but it is, there's a screenshot of it. And we can see that, look at this huge response that Ewan Lenehan gave to Jared Holt, of which Jared Holt didn't publish. Then we have CJR itself publishing overt fake news. So what is this? Well, what I was trying to say early on, or maybe it's in a different video, I can't remember. You have journalists who are either lying. In this instance, I am going to directly accuse Jared Holt of lying. I will say that, and you know, I've talked with him in the past, I've met him in person, and I'm going to say it is my personal opinion Jared Holt is lying outright and knows full well that he's lying. It was not an accident. It is an outright lie. We can see here what the bias of Columbia Journalism Review. The fact that they would publish the Alternative Influence Network, which claims Chris Ray Gun is connected to Richard Spencer. I kid you not. If you don't know who Chris Ray Gun is, he makes games about, he makes videos about games and jokes. Richard Spencer is alt-right. I don't even think either of these guys have ever said their names until this thing was published. I bet Spencer doesn't even know who Chris Ray Gun is. The article connected me to Stefan Molyneux. Met the guy one time recently, like a few months ago, when he was like, oh, hey, Tim, nice to meet you. I'm like, how's it going? And that was it. The most I've ever talked to him. They claimed we did a guest collaboration. Ridiculous lies. I also have I had a conversation with a New York-based journalist who confirmed from Data and Society, quote, some connections are not actual. Did CJR do any fact-checking? No. Did The Guardian? Did Fast Company? No. None of these people did. So I have to assume, because Jared Holt has shared this study in the past, and he didn't fact-check it, he's lying. Plain and simple. Jared, if you're watching, I'm calling you a liar. I'm calling you a liar because I know you know what this report is. I know you've read it. I know you know it's factually incorrect because you never fact-checked it. No, hold on, let me stop. I'll say this. You're a liar because you didn't fact-check this report, but you shared it. Other outlets shared it, including CGR, who did not fact-check it. You never confirmed this. You never bothered to confirm it. So you either just don't care, which means you're lying about whether or not you're actually concerned if Quillette did any fact-checking, or you know full well you personally have published outright fake news and you're willfully manipulating people because, I don't know, you're a bad person. And this is actually really interesting, too, because I was in Portland for a protest, and there was a journalist, Actually, interestingly enough, one of the people named in the Ewan Lenahan report who lied to a ridiculous degree about what happened in Portland. And I was just like, wow, none of that happened. And Jared Holt actually got the story pretty spot on about the conflict between like Proud Boys, right-wing and left-wing groups. I was like, wow, probably the best write-up came from Jared Holt. So I have to wonder why he would publish this nonsense and why CJR's, editors would allow these two stories to coexist when they quite literally contradict each other. How can you have one story claiming you didn't fact check a dubious report, but they also didn't fact check a dubious report? And also, I know for a fact CGR knows it's dubious because I've reached out to them and sent them many messages. So I doubt they just, maybe they just click delete when they see it's Tim Pool, just delete it. Even though I've spoken at Columbia on more than one occasion and given a guest lecture to a PhD journalism class. I don't know if they're associated with Columbia necessarily. I don't know what CGR if it is, but I will say this. I'm not going to read through the Daily Caller story. I don't care if all of this proves all of their, Jared Holt's lying or whatever. I think we're seeing a decent amount of evidence that Ewan Lenahan provided some in-depth information pertaining to what his study was about, and we can see that it is up for a review, at least with this social networks. All that really matters is that CJR is full of it because they published fake news, overt fake news, without fact-checking it, and then Jared Holt complained that someone else did literally the same thing. I guess it is kind of different considering Ewan Lenahan actually does have a data set he presented, and the AIN report literally has no data set. I kid you not. The woman from Data Society literally just used she just made connections up. She claimed that I was connected to a bunch of people I never met before. She drew a line from me to Andy Worski. I don't even know who that guy is. It's ridiculous. But the line from me to Stefan Molyneux, it's like, dude, I know who that guy is. I've said hello to him one time, and that was 3 or 4 months ago. And this study came out September. Never met the guy before. So outright lies, false statements of fact from Data Society. But you know what? I don't go around calling their sponsors and doing any of that stupid nonsense. I don't publish this story, contradicting my own publication. So you know what? I'm gonna leave it there. I don't care for this story anymore. But I will end by saying, I believe it is my personal understanding that because Jared is familiar with the AIN report and didn't fact check it, he's either lying, like he knows it's fake news and he's sharing it because it's politically expedient, and then doing this because it's politically expedient. He has no principles or standards. Or the issue is he's just really, really bad at his job, which I want to stress. I don't think is the case. I'm really confused because, like I said, his report for Right Wing Watch from Portland was the best report out of any of the stories that had come out, save for a few independent journalists, like Huffington Post, Daily Beast. They just wrote nonsense. It's overt fake news. And then he wrote for Right Wing Watch, with actual nuance and understanding. I'm like, oh wow. And then I see this, and I'm like, what are you doing? So maybe it's the editor. Maybe it's the editor from CJR. So I don't know, but we'll leave it there. Stick around. I got some more segments coming up in a few moments, and I will see you shortly.